Welcome back to part 2 of building the header. In this video we'll format the content of the hero text box, so this heading and those buttons. Let's start by looking at the main heading. We should probably make it wide, right? So let's go back to the H1 style here and continue to define how it should look like. So color, I will make it right, and I will specify its font size as well. Now, the basic font size of our HTML document is 20 pixels. Now, in responsive web design, we want everything to be relative. So we can say that our font size should be 200%. And then this means that our heading element will be 40 pixels, which is exactly 200% of 20 pixels, right? So if we later want to change this size, we can just change the HTML global font size, let's say to 18, and then this size will automatically decrease as well. And we will use this method for all other elements on the web page, so they will all be defined relatively to this base size of 20 pixels. And then by adjusting this, all other elements will automatically adjust their size. And 200% looks good to start with, or maybe 240%, because we really want this to be big. So let's check how it looks like. Okay, much better. Now you probably remember that I said in the design section that when we use very big headlines, we should decrease the font weight. And we will do that right now. And we should also maybe set this to uppercase, because I think it looks much better. So let's go back here and do that. And like with this, I can show you many ways to format text. So let's decrease the font weight to 300. Because usually the H1 elements come with bold formatting, and that's not what we want. And we will make it uppercase. For that we use the text transform property. Let's say uppercase. And another thing we can do is the letter spacing, so it's not so compressed, and also a word spacing, so some space between different words. All of this makes a big headline like this look much better. I can go with 3 pixels here, for example, or maybe 4. Let's see how it looks like. Okay, much better now. But now we have this ugly line break here, healthy meals, and we don't want that. So let's just break it here, so that we have goodbye junk food, and then in the next line, hello super healthy meals, right? This will be much better. So do you remember how we do that? Easy as this, just a BR element. Much better now, right? So now let's format these buttons here. First, we should attribute some class to this one, and I usually call him button. And now we will have 2 kinds of buttons. The first one will be a orange button with a full orange color, and the other one will be a so-called ghost button, which will have just an outline, an orange outline, and then be transparent in the inside. And what I'll do now is to create a class for each of those buttons. Let me just show you. Button, this one will be called full, and button ghost. So I will put the common styles like the font size and the font color and the button size. I will put these inside this button class, and then I will create a button full class which is specifically designed for the full button, and a button ghost class which will be specifically designed for the ghost button. Alright, so let's go back to the style file down here. So button. Now in the lecture about the box model, I told you that there were block elements and inline elements, right? Now there is also a mix between those two elements, which is called the inline block. And the inline block is just like an inline element, but that can have padding and margin. So the difference is that it doesn't force a line break, but you can attribute it some padding and some margin, unlike a normal inline element. And so a normal A element like this is an inline element, but we want it to be an inline block. So we can change that by using display and then say inline block. And now we can give it some padding. And let's say we want the top to have 10 pixels and on the right and the left side 30 pixels. Now do you remember, if we just put 30 and 10, then this will mean that we have 10 pixels of padding on top and bottom and 30 pixels left and right. Okay? Now another thing is we also want the font weight to be 300 here. So let me check. Alright, so you see we have some padding here now, and it looks good. We also have this text underline here that we need to get rid of because it's kind of ugly, you know. So we use text decoration and we want none of it. Very well, so this is the common button style. So both buttons have this in common. And now let's start with the full button. And now let's choose a color. As I told you before, we will use the flat UI tool right here. Flat UI colors. Okay, that's the one we want. So we have some oranges down here, and to me it looks like this one is the best to use in this case. So I'll just click here. And now the color is selected. So I will say that we want the background color of this button to be this color. Here we see it's a nice orange, and let me go back here, and here it is. Now it's a nice orange button. Very well. Now we maybe want some border radius here, right? So we want this to be round on both sides. So we can just put a ridiculously high border radius here, like, I don't know, 200 pixels. Very well. Now the text should probably be white for this button, right? Actually, for both of the buttons. So let's put it right here. Color FFF is white. So very well. Now the style for the ghost button. We want the border to be orange. So we did this before. With this border, we want it to be 1 pixel, solid line, and then the color. And we will use this color here. Now you see this button is slightly bigger than this one, and there's a reason for that. If you remember from the box model, the height and the width of an element is the content plus the padding plus the border. So this element is higher because it has that 1 pixel border. So in order to make these two the same height and width, we just add that border to this button as well. And we also want some distance between this, right? And probably the best way of doing this is to add some bottom margin to this H1 element. Let's go back, and as I said, we will add this border here so that they look the same, and then some margin bottom. So this one is the margin top, right? And here we want the margin bottom like 20 pixels maybe. Now I actually don't like this white color here so much because of the color of the line. So let's make this text here orange, because it looks kind of weird with the orange line and the white text. So this here will go to the full button so that the full button is actually white, and this button down here will be orange, like the line color. Alright, so we defined how the buttons look like. Now, buttons or links in general in CSS can have different states. Link, visited, active, and hover. Now link is just how the element looks in the normal state. And how do we specify this? We just put it here. This is called pseudo classes. So I just write link here. So this means the A element in its normal state. Then we have the visited state, which is how the element will look like after it has been visited. And maybe sometimes you notice that some links in some internet websites look different after you have clicked them. Now we don't want this to happen, so we say that the visited links should look just like the normal links in their normal state. So we do this here. So we say button visited. So button link and button visited have both the same style, which means they will both look the same. And we have to do the same thing down here. Button link and button full visited, and the same thing down here. Button ghost link. Alright. Now there are two different states, which is hover when we put our mouse over a button, and the active state, which is when we click on a button. And we can specify that in in CSS here. So we can say what will happen when we put the mouse on the button. And in order to do so, we say button and then hover. And we want the button to look exactly the same when we hover it or when we click on it, so when it's active. So we say button hover and button active. And what we want our buttons to do is to have a darker orange tone so that we can see some change there, right? Do you remember the tool that we used to get darker shades of a color? It is the 0 to 255 tool. Let me just copy this. And we'll use this tool, 0 to 255. Okay. So this is how it looks like. And I will paste our orange tone here. Don't need this. Alright, this is our original orange tone that we're using on our website. And now we want a darker shade. And this is very similar, so let's use this. I'll just click here, and now it's copied. So what I do now is that I say that when I put my mouse on the button, I want its background color to be this one. Alright, let's just put this code down here so that we have the normal declarations like link and visited before, and then the hover and the active states. Here is actually visited. And now let's check this out. Okay, so now our buttons change their color. Now we have some problems here, as you see. First is the text color here, and second is the border color. We see in both that there is still the lighter orange color still showing here. So we have to change that as well. And in order to do so, we will have to change these classes. We'll just copy these and change the things that I want so that I don't have to write everything again. So it's hover here and active and hover and active. So I don't need this. I don't need this. So the button full should not only have this background color here, but also its border should have that color. Alright, and the same thing here for the ghost button. The difference with the ghost button is that we also want the font color to be white. So FFF here, and now it should work as we want. Great. Now this looks great, right? Now one thing, and this is a little more advanced, is that we want to have a little transition from one color to the other. So this gets just orange instantaneously, but we want to see a nice transition. And we can actually do this using just CSS. And I will just show you how. So all we need to do here is in the button class to set the transition property. And this is actually CSS3 already. So what we want to say here is that the background color should change with a transition. Let me just write it. Background color. Now we'll say 0.2 seconds. So what happens now is that when we hover over a link, over one of these buttons, The background color will not change instantaneously, but over a period of 0.2 seconds. And we want not only the background color to change, but also the border and also the font color. So that is all a nice, smooth transition from one state to the other. So we can specify more than one property here. So we want background color to change, we want border to change for 0.2 seconds as well, and we want color to change over a period of 0.2 seconds. Right? So let's see how this works. But last thing, we also want some margins between the buttons, because they're like glued together right now. So let me just change here the full button. I will add a margin to the right. So when I say, for example, 15 pixels to the right, then the button will show this nice distance. And as you see, the transition works exactly as we planned it, right? In both buttons. So this looks much better than it did before. And yeah, you just learned how to do this. Great, right? And this closes part 2 of building the header. In the next and last part of building the header, we'll just add a simple navigation and the OmniFoot logo. See you there.